Welcome. Thank you, Greg. Great introduction. I love this thematic view of the digital and the real as we're here together. My name is Eric Paulos. I'm faculty here in the Berkeley Center for New Media. I also hold an appointment in electroengineering computer science, and I want to welcome you also to Berkeley. It's a great honor to have such an amazing group of speakers today to look at some very critical issues around sort of creativity and publishing, and a lot of issues that will come out around how media shapes our world. And I think I'm looking forward to it. We're going to have two speakers this morning, Francois Bon, and also, as Greg mentioned, Martin Zimper. The first speaker, Martin, actually this might feel vaguely familiar for him. A long time ago, he actually got a degree in mechanical engineering, and this is somewhat close to the mechanical engineering side of the university. But Francois has authored a number of books, which many of you are familiar with, that deal with subjects as diverse as rock brands and factories and future of publishing. He's not only published, but he's also led a movement to have individuals participate and developed his own e-publishing platform. And it's a big part of, I think, the message that he'll be delivering and some of the sort of successes and the struggles with that kind of platform. And he also mainly works now at looking at experimental and creative writing, which is where he teaches at the Sciences Po Paris. And I'm going to welcome him to the stage, and then we'll also hear from Martin after that. So, Francois, thank you.
Just as a brief digital autobiography. So first, a very long time ago, it was 1982. I'm 20 years old. I published my first book. I ran across Samuel Beckett or Rob Grillet in the stairwell at l'édition de minuit. With my first royalties, I buy myself a leather-bound edition of Flaubert, 16 books, and my first refrigerator. Great thing. Bookstore sells a book, newspapers write articles, everything will surely go on like forever. 1983. However, I'm already on my fourth typewriter. A two-stone ribbon, manual return one, to a ribbon one, then electric keys, an IBM, well, IBM Asphere, IBM type ball, then to a daisy wheel, and the appearance of a new availability. I can go back over the last 15 characters and correct them before the letters crack. I still have carbon paper to make a copy, and scissors and tape to format the text. 1988, I received my first computer, an Atari 1040. Among my friends, Denise Bergogneau, Novarina, they have most a little Mac Classic that looks like a cube. Pierre Michon, another one, at an Amstrad. I have a pin-dot matrix printer with a roll of perforated paper, a lot of noise. There's no hard disk. First you have to load the disk system, then the word processing disk, then the disk works, having two copies on the disk itself, but no more paper. 1990, we agree on a new manuscript with Jérôme Ladon from the Édition de Minuit. I ask him if he wants my disk. His answer, I hate Macintosh literature. 2 days later, he calls me back. Send me your disk anyway. Publishing has become digital in France. Since my first book, I haven't done anything else. Every 2 years, a new publication. My first request to appear as a writer on the radio, grants, Villa Medici, Berlin DAAD, traditional business. Someone who publishes a book doesn't benefit from any privileged social status, but authors' royalties do have the benefit of a tax relief. We raise our children close to the sea, everything goes fine. When a book appears in the month of September, it's printed in July. In August, it's sent to the critics at their vacation address. The big sellers get up to 30 or 40,000 copies. The Medici Prize for the Beautiful Cherokee by Jean Echenoz. The Jean Rouault Goncourt gets up to 100,000. Today, it's about 800,000 for Goncourt. We live on little, but we live it all. In Sweden, Denmark, Germany, the Netherlands, I'm translated. What chance? In Chinese also. In China too. We exchange the rights, which are negotiated for between 300 and $500. But I have friends in each of these countries. Now, the same book everywhere, but no longer ours. 1992. I live in Montpellier, south of France, not the USA one. When for a film or play project, I work with a Parisian friend. I connect my computer to the phone jack with a 5600 baud modem, and the file passes from my computer to his. Miracle. 20 years earlier, exactly, in my engineering school, I learned the Fortran language of perforated cards. A little earlier, in 1970, 40 years ago, we received our first Hewlett-Packard calculators from USA. But on exams, only our slide rule was permitted and required. This is my life. 1994, it's the age of the CD-ROM. I acquired a new Littré, our old and best French language dictionary, an atlas, an encyclopedia, then the complete works of Balzac and Proust. The screen of my PowerBook 145 is still in black and white, but it's portable and can at least an hour on the battery. The hard disks are, sorry, hard to, pas mon tout. Ce serait tellement mieux si vous parliez français, mais on ne peut pas tout demander. Non, mais my hard disk is 45 megabytes. It's so huge that I call this hard disk Ocean on my Mac screen. Today, I don't know. Now I no longer give names to my hard disk. My Mac Air doesn't even have an hard disk. Above all, it's as big as my two hands. I use my computer as a notebook. 1996, I arrived in Tours, where I still live. In Le Monde, I read an article explaining that on the internet you can download Baudelaire's Fleur du Mal. I have a 13200 baud fax modem. I make a CompuServe account. Then I'm sent to the University in Aix-en-Provence to download the Netscape 10 browser, which takes a good hour. So I enter the address given by Le Monde, and maybe a minute later I open the file in my word processor. As thanks, I send a letter by post to the University of Genève, Department of Mineralogy, which hosts the first database of text, and I offer them, also by post, facsimile on first original editions of Rabelais that I've transcribed myself on my computer over the previous 2 years. And so I discovered the collaborative principle of the World Wide Web. I hand-copied the first edition of Une saison en enfer, Illumination by Rimbaud, Alcool by Apollinaire, and while in 1898, after purchasing a scanner, I finished to copy Lautréamont. But there are 3 of us, one in Montreal, one in Brazil, and myself in France, who offer the same HTML version in the same time. The French National Library, BNF, doesn't have a website yet. But I understand that an era is an era, une époque, is causing. One of the first business to offer a large digital library, Acamedia, went bankrupt. It was too early. Who would have been interested? I now have on my home computer a good 1,000 digital copies of titles. 1998. I put the text I asked my writer friends for online, while explaining them the importance of an internet presence to them. I take on a new role, the one who takes care of their internet presence in their place. The site is always running. It's called remue.net, and I'll separate my personal site a bit later. I need several years to understand that acting in the place of another isn't a good solution. The literary internet is still meager, but there's the appearance of a couple of online journals. I love webcams. I follow 5 or 6 around the world. They don't show much, a gas station in Iceland, a port in Scotland, but the relation with what's not accessible to us in the world ceases to presume the preceding catastrophe. 2000. I'm finishing a 10 years work about the reception of rock in Europe and the constitution of culture in the media age. Already a transition story. A 1,000-page book called Rolling Stones, a Biography. I have purchased over the years a bunch of bootleg CDs, kilos of books, old magazines in London, Helter Skelter, or the fabulous World Trade Center bookstore in New York basement. Every resource is a conquest, which necessitates a tip, contacts, exchange, and finally a transaction. In 2006, I published the following, the 70s version of the same essay called Led Zeppelin, a Portrait. The smallest detail was discussed on web forums, and if we will exchange films of bootleg books, the whole archives come through the internet. Particularly, a Japanese guy who spent years to photography each location, home, studio, venues where the Zeppelin has been, and put them online. Or another one who provides every flyer, concert tickets, posters. Writing could avoid producing a representation of the world inside the novel itself. This is a true revolution. The world is beginning to provide himself anytime, everywhere, his own representation. How to avoid it interferes deeply on how to build a story. Something happened. By the way, the millennial bug didn't happen. 2002. Lots of dreams for years now. Or how can fiber optics be taken advantage for fast internet? Not arrived yet to my place. Electrical outlets, why not? More realistic. But when it's proposed to us to use the whole copper telephone wires, what an idea. ADSL, asymmetric digital subscriber line, the information that you send over it goes less quickly than what you receive. But in one fell swoop, no more need to buy a printed newspaper. We flip out through it with the same speed at our screens. And on the Bibliothèque Nationale new website, I can flip through author's first draft in picture mode and the premature hand of CD-ROMs. Who could have guessed? 2005. My site is made up of close to 600 individual HTML pages, about 7,000 entries today. My full I can work. The appearance of Blogspot as the first easily configurable CMS for non-computer scientists, as I am. From then on, my site is a database. What it means? For the moment, I continue to give my manuscripts to my editor. On the site, the construction of the book, the author's journal, writing workshops, and then when the book is released, the articles and interviews concerning the book. The internet as cultural media. Strangely, it's still the dominant model for American authors. A blog uses whichever platform, mostly Blogspot, acquired these days by Google, to provide direct access in place of buying the book. In 206, I want to give myself a constraint that permits me fantasy or science fiction writing. For a year, every day I publish a brief story directly issued from my daily experience, or a dream, or in the form of microfiction. I connect it to photographs. I insert hypertext, always with doors open to other text, links, sound. The site is called Tumult. At the end of 1 year, I publish what I consider to be a global fiction, fiction being also what protects in the daily and intimate exhibition on our website. This fragmentation, according to the daily time spent writing, is not new in literature, from Montaigne to Stendhal of Kafka's Journal and Lost Diaries, or a lot of others, or microfiction by Robert Walser, published daily in the Berlin newspapers in the beginning of this century. But when I publish my book with Fayard, all the articles say, Bon publishes his blog. End of it. I understand at that moment that I've taken a new step. The publication on the website, which is underground gallery, with his underground galleries indexes in a way of reading that's superior to that of the printed book. Only we are there in it. We are always there in it. What took me from author to writer is a symbolic understanding of that role. Who would grant that to writing on the web? 2018. For almost 10 years, regular but fruitless conversations with my editors and my friends who work in publishing houses, bookstores, libraries, or how to use the web. And so I'm overseeing a collection of contemporary literature at Les Éditions du Seuil. I often receive short texts from young authors, for whom the site permanently steps from the manuscripts, transforming them into a book would be like trying to force a foot into two small shoes. And so I set off on my own. I create a digital publishing house, Public.net, in the beginning only in order to make available online in PDF format the text that my writer friends, and I kept out the text that my writer friends and I kept on our hard disks. In New York, I buy my first liseuse. We keep in French this feminine form, the French word for a reader, a Sony, and then some Kindles. If reading habits are being established there with specific bookstores, why not create a workspace for contemporary literature? Besides, our websites suffocate under their own limits. How can you read a 300 text in a division of a site? How can you bring it with you on the beach or on the train? We will discover the EPUB format like a new frontier. A closing, a little box shuts with bits of text in it, the CSS files, cascading style sheets. We keep the American word in France, but give them a face, the possibility of including images, sounds. We launch a digital experimental review, and above all, the metadata files, which will allow for a hazy request coming from a general platform, Amazon, iTunes, or directly on a browser, to bring forth that very text as a suggestion. C'est terrible, cette maladresse, comme on entend. This experience will last 5 years and will be beautiful, but I think we had underestimated the distrust and the passivity of the traditional book trade, literary press included, and the passivity too of the university, so completely concerned with digital technology, science, social science, but stopping at humanities and literature, even in USA. 2010 events. For at least 3 months, I keep going over these themes. A limited number of things seem to be progressively detaching. This closing of distinct elements, text, graphic mask, metadata, it also makes up the printed book in that it goes from the editor to the printer and is also present in the smallest word processing file. A student who starts his studies in mathematics or geography will right away learn to master these digital tools that will be the vocabulary of his thinking. In France, a great philosopher, Gilbert Simondon, who influenced from Deleuze to Stigler, theorized this necessity for the thought not to be separated from the technical object. What do we do in the humanities departments or in training on the craft of the book to implant this digital culture? Up to date. For an immense majority of authors, we were my friends in the time of paper publishing. Even today, the internet is only a media, a promotion tool. You type your name to Google, and you see your Wikipedia page appear, newspaper articles about you, books to be sold, according to the way of Amazon, or in France, or local Fnac, or whichever independent store has handed over its ransom to Google and press articles. This is called digital identity. Very early on, to create my own understanding of digital identity, I use a metaphor of an artist's workspace, l'atelier du peintre. You enter what you want. You can watch him work. He goes to a subject, as Cézanne said. Some canvases are turned back to face the wall. In the workspace, there are even the books he is actually reading, the curiosities or objects or pictures he has bought, or the workspace of an instrument maker friend, dead now. In a little window for which his workspace looks out over the street, he places an old instrument to be soon repaired. The mold of an instrument being actually made, and we see him himself from the street making his bow or preparing his varnish. This assumes buying his own domain name to assure the ownership of your own database. Google will treat the data of a WordPress website that you host under the form myname.com, or that WordPress hosts under the form myname.wordpress.com completely differently. Recently, the site of a friend, Valer Novarina, who is a celebrated, well-respected author, didn't appear until very far down in the Google searches. His own name never came up on the pages of his own site, because it was his. Questions obviously become even more decisive when you express yourself in a language like the French language, slowly falling to the status of a regional language. Yesterday, the welcome message in the United Plane yesterday was given in 6 languages, but no French anymore. And given that the totality of the actors on the web, research, bookstore, machines, software, and even domain name authority are yours, you Americans. And that we have an amazing opportunity compared to the political, aesthetic, or social changes. The changes in writing can be counted in one hand. The invention of writing, which is far from applying to all language, 1/3 about. The extraordinary story of the clay tablet, when the simplification of the tool, the bevel-cut tip of a reed, while quickening the speed of writing, is part of the change from iconic writing to syllabic writing. The techniques for authenticating a text, a layer of raw clay covering the layer of baked clay with the same text. The invention of the page. The first clay tablets were molded by hand, writing wraps around it. Reproductibility, reproductability, you understand that. Crude tablets were kept in a water pail to be used again. The primacy of reproducing images, the seal, the card used for divination made from the livers of sacrificed animals. Then we spread to the Egyptian roll through the Mediterranean. Là, par contre, j'ai du mal vraiment à... En français, ça marche bien, ouais. Et de là, vous passez au rouleau d'Égypte, au testament de Ramsès II, then we spread to the Egyptian scroll through the Mediterranean. Et ça marche plus du tout chez vous. Je ne peux pas penser autrement qu'en français. No worry, and I'm going for the end. The biography of Ramsès II, 35 meters, 35 meters long, accompanied him in his tomb, no other reader. It's very important. The cementing of oral corpus, the cementing of oral writing. Homer. Non, ça marche pas, oral writing, ça va. Bon. And the word book, which referred to the parts of a Roman long text cut in separated roll, the first metadata, author, title, book, or the plug that seal that case. Tiens, une petite leçon de français quand même, ça va me redonner de l'énergie. Chose complètement, just to take my own energy. Une chose magnifique, vous voyez comme notre langue, je peux de la fierté quand même à dire un peu de français ici. Chose magnifique quand arrive le codex, c'est-à-dire ce qui remplace pour les Romains le rouleau, et c'est Martial qui écrit des choses ironiques, qui charge, et les Romains donc utilisent le rouleau comme ça, et après il faut le renrouler en le tirant. Et Martial contre le codex dit, mais qu'est-ce que sont ces livres qui ne sont pas salis du menton? Je comprends rien, mais moi, maintenant, j'ai retrouvé mon énergie. The invention of codex, and the word that came along with it, the copies, separated notebooks of a manuscript, copied identically, so that several copies can work simultaneously, but always from the single copy closest to the original. Finally, not Gutenberg's printing press, but how Aldo Manuccio in Venice, taking from the Koreans' painting on silk robes, has the idea of a rod on which movable characters are attached. The author could be burned, he said, but from 1,000 printed copies, not larger than your pocket, the idea will still not be stopped. Finally, the very complex story of how newspapers and serialization interfered with forms of literature. 5 major changes, 5 changes only. Digital writing is the 6th. Each of its major moves has been irreversible and global. For each of these changes, we get rid of the precise chronometers. Balzac, the definitive pseudonym of Honoré Balsa, will have 3 successive names that correspond to 3 successive stages of forms for commercializing his writings, from fascicule for reading room, then to serial publishing and monthly reviews, with each time a different way of telling a story. Finally, last axiom, the unpredictable. Even at Berkeley, we are talked about the future of books. But the book is only one particular form of the written, and the written, one particular form of literature, language as réflexion, Maurice Blanchot stated. The question that is presented to us in the time of transition is that it is up to us to act in a responsible manner in the immediate present, to teach, to pass on, to carry with us in the crossing of the ford the living words that we have inherited. The beautiful sentence by Rabelais, I build only living stones, these are men. These living stones are entrusted to us. Even through all the present transformations appear suddenly, erratically, and only reveal themselves to us retrospectively. Word processing doesn't change. Is it a regression for dense reading? A surgeon who operates from a distance from his Mac on a brain tumor has on his screen, like the pilot of United Boeing, a dozen different open windows. When we read a printed book, with our notebook of comments set on the table, and the day's newspapers on the side, or heaven at a cafe and the friendly voices just nearby, is reading not already and always has been a social act. Multitasking has taken part of this in these unpredictable micro-revolutions. In 2010, the iPad appeared. We take the web with us. I remember having discovered in April 2010 in Boston the first ad for the iPad. People in socks on their couch. How far have we come? The little reader icon on iOS, the little pair of green glasses on the Kindle Fire 3 weeks ago, indicate that the browser rewrites a web page and gives it us with ergonomics up to us to define the parameters exactly identical to that of the digital book, e-book. With a button sent to Kindle, we read a streaming text with the same ergonomics as began with the EPUB. 2013. Is there stabilization at the horizon? Surely not, or not yet. We can even confirm that the season of great movement hasn't full started. Here in the US, the distribution of e-books is put forth as a visual extension of the printed book. It's even physically visible in Barnes & Noble bookstores with a space set aside for the nook in the entrance. But appropriating the web as a vector for literature has remained in the realm of magazine and reviews, which are a fantastic workshop on the web, but they don't take advantage of the economic model to the same level as the traditional method, and even less that the great giants you Americans have so kindly offered to the world, Apple, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, a bunch of few other, Adobe, Yahoo, Cloudflare, the last one, the rarity of brick-and-mortar libraries, or in any case, the degree to which they are becoming rare, the bookstore, has probably delayed this change by making the web a vector for acquiring objects in the way that they don't care that I read on my Kindle. The stratification by genre, novel, romance, fantasy, poetry, without talking about the writer's aid line in your country, is found even more reinforced, even while American literature was one of the first to develop forms like the short story, non-fiction, that give literature of creation an appropriation of the word outside of all hierarchies, up to the writer to create the most direct rapport between language and still unwritten reality. Conclusion, well, just for me. Writing change in the end. En français, c'est joli, c'était... Écrire change-t-il... Non, je me rappelle plus de toute façon. Enfin bon, c'était joli quand même, j'étais content de moi. The author's notebook doesn't change. There are always sketches, cut papers, documentation. What changed is that we can integrate them anywhere at distinct levels in the object as separate ourselves form so that it belongs to its reader. The author's library doesn't change too. Faulkner venerated Tolstoy and hated Dostoevsky because, he said, of his disorder. But while having a much worse one, Proust was bored by Tolstoy and venerated Dostoevsky, but wrote Salon on the same formal principle as Tolstoy. Our task of teaching doesn't change. Even if the American authors rise to the highest level in contemporary literature without meditating on the edges of books, as we in Europe are obliged to do, if we want to survive in a world that doesn't require us anymore. But we know that in all times, the dense rapport with the text has surged from the same place, and with the same writing medium, that where private use is established, from reading aloud for a few listeners to Rabelais times, and that's the dramaturge's case in his recital from the epistolary novel whose gold hour in 17th century, Madame de Sévigné, Diderot, was that of a unified and quick postal service, partially freed from royal censorship on a countrywide level. Her students used to keep themselves informed, read, write, listen, in the same movement, smartphone, laptop. So yet, with literature, and what it brings of subversion and transgression, like the beat poets emerged vocally on campuses because the musical space had created a place for them that the printed word had refused, work for the laptop. Fetishizing a unified technical objects, it keeps progressively disappearing. 5 years ago today, his colleagues made fun of a young Indian MIT student, Pranav Mistry, who walked around with a giant camera set on his head, strapped on a worker hard hat, and a video projector data show on his chest, his hand as a screen, before everything could be miniaturized. And here we have today Google Glasses. We must permanently negotiate an object with a millennial history, long time evolving, writing, in a context of a story of radically moving mediums, and first of all, mercantile. Look at the word processing. What difference is there between your first word software, for me, 1993, almost 20 years ago, and today's version? But do you still use Word? Your mail management software makes up its own database on your computer. Most likely to find a file sent by a student, you archive the email with its attachment. This will be faster and easier to find. There's little for every text we write. We open a new file specific to its text and archives some files from hundreds. A book, on the contrary, on our computer, is no longer a single file, but a vast dossier made up of separated research, different versions of work, and certainly an array of archiving organized links, tools like Zotero and messengers. Software appears, I'm thinking of Ulysses 3, that doesn't create a separated file for a text, but allows you to write as you intend into a unique database that you can archive at the same time on your computer and outside of your computer, and present characteristics like being able to tie in at any moment of the book or the article or the notebook, these links, images, emails, meetings. Another characteristic, we only write by way of the comfort of a screen, which you manage to your liking. The function of exporting the text is specific to the way in which the text is going to circulate and how it will be reproduced and accessible for reading on a website with an electronic book via a PDF or separated text file. How can such a revolution, still so new, who in this room has swayed between pages of Word or Open Office of Word processing to a markdown software for text? And equally ask a mathematician friend, who among them doesn't use LaTeX? Not a critic, but a question. The code that stays invisible to us because stable in our 300 years long use of the typography from manuscript writing since well before that, at what moment must it become, in the name of our libertine language, an element of culture to teach or transmit? That's where I am. In 25 years of the computer, 30 years of the world of traditional publishing passed from a stable world to an unstable one. The question of technology is completely secondary to that of the culture. The unpredictability of our moment in transition is chaotic, dangerous. because it eliminates the established positions to begin with the status of the écrivain. In French, more than simply writer, it's a word invented only in the 17th century and to which only the 19th century has conferred a symbolic dimension. But this present itself is also inextricably a story which we can and must treat as such under the condition of reaching in by way of stories of the preceding transitions. Which of us would not have liked to write at the time of the invention of the printing press, like Rabelais? Which of us would not have liked to write at the time of the appearance of serials and newspapers, like Dickens or Dumas, or the appearance of the locomotives, like Flaubert and Zola, or electricity and the telephone, like Proust? Please take it as extreme and real luck to be seized ourselves by the chance now and blindly happening, and that our writing, captured by new forms of reading and distribution, obliges us to jump. It's only that word for me that counts. Au fond de l'inconnu pour trouver du nouveau. C'est Baudelaire. A little long and très maladroit, je m'explique.